Great.
Yes.
Okay, so we've gone through introductions, and as I said, this will be a high-level view, a conceptual view of the, now we're spacewalking, of this, and stop us and ask questions anytime. It's pretty informal. We did this yesterday with a couple of institutions, and there are some really good questions that folks had that were fun to talk through. So don't hesitate to do that, to stop us, because this is really for you. So let me share my screen. We have just a few kind of PowerPoint-ish kind of things just to keep the conversation, keep the frame of the conversation going. Can everyone see my title slide?
Yeah.
Cool. All right. So we'll do a fairly brief conceptual overview with some details of the inventory and a bit about the data that institutions will provide that will be a part of this platform. Talk a little bit about next steps. You've seen this a lot. I'm just going to kind of get us back in the frame. We have 9 conditions that are operating currently through this pilot process of this project. They are not mutually exclusive, and quite often some will intersect in really important ways as you work through the guided process of self-study. There are a couple of sessions next week, I believe, Susan and Jane, about how to think about setting up your conditions teams, and so that will be relevant for you as well. Just a reminder of the 2-year plan, the 2-year process that we'll go through. So what we're really into is the first couple here. The fellows are being assigned, the contracts are being signed. We're starting to talk about with institutions about the data gathering process and the elements that will be a part of that. And then this fall, which Rob will talk more about, what does that look like in terms of your calendars, which is really what you want to know most, is where is the heavy lifting, where do you have to block out some time in an already busy schedule at the beginning of fall semester to be able to do this work. To pull one out, the student purpose and pathways condition has a description about it. It's about learning and developmental outcomes. It's about coherence of the curricular journey through what the institution offers, what students actually go through, where the bottlenecks sometimes advisors deal with and address those kinds of things all the time. And so imagine, if you will, okay, you've got this condition, what data will inform our analysis, our self-analysis about where our institution is within the frame of this condition. So there will be a series of prompts that will be, in essence, the workbook through the platform that Rob will tell you a little bit more about. And even prior to that, data will be brought into the platform that will then be churned to create the tables that the conditions teams are able to view, analyze, and ask more questions about. And so that's why the data folks really do their work at the front end primarily. It's not kind of done through once we do that, but the data need to be in there before the conditions teams can start to analyze according to these key elements and key performance indicators within the conditions. So Rob, turn it over to you to talk about the inventory elements.
You're on mute again.
Oh, this muting and unmuting. I just want to go back to that platform thing again where they're going to upload data. the platform again is something that will be used by everybody that's on the task force. Everybody on the task force should have an account. Don't share your username and password. That hopefully is something we've all heard for many years, so it's not new. The platform is meant to do many things. It's meant to provide transparency in the project. It's not just something that Liz is going to do with, is it Carolyn? You know, at American Public University. And it's not something that Susan and Wendy are going to do for some other institution. This is something that a task force of people are going to get together and do. And by being able to give accounts to anyone that is curious, as well as everybody on the project, they can all go in and see how different sections and conditions are being answered and what is being used as evidence. So, you know, another purpose of the platform is to reduce the rumoring. You know, you got to do what you can do, and that's one way to do it. It serves also as a project management tool, so people know where they are, what needs to be done, what's out there, you know, expectations. Because it's also someplace where you are going to put your answers when you're on these condition committees. It's going to serve a historical record of what was done in 2018, 2019, 2020, you know, what discussions were had, what brought about these recommendations, and then how did you go about doing it and who was involved. All of that is going to be kept into the platform. And so that when you are or are not there in 2022 or 2025, somebody is there in your place and they're going, why in the world are we doing this now? You don't have to repeat the whole process, although you could, but you can also go back and we can share with them what created, you know, the world they're in 2025. You know, this is, like I said, a way to share the information across the institution, the committees. It's also a way to keep the EAA fellow who is going to help guide the process and be your guide on the side, make sure that they know what's going on. They'll be able to see, even if they can't participate in the committees, every meeting and hear everything that's going on, they can see sort of the results of that on the platform. And it'll help them when they're providing their feedback and preparing for meetings with folks on your task force. Everything is going to, the committees will be able to provide recommendations, and this will track those. So that's sort of the platform that all this goes into. Now we'll jump into yeah, thank you, right there. The inventory and the data. So the population here is 9.5 years worth of data, and it's the entire undergraduate degree seeking population. And with that, we'll be able to get at least, well, four full cohorts over 150%, not quite that. When you're looking at the new iPads outcome measures where they want to look over 8 years of reporting. But it allows us to get close. And we're going to show results using those outcome measures, populations of first-time full-time, first-time part-time, not first-time part-time, and not first-time full-time. So that's how we'll sort of break out these tables that are in there. Okay. So in order for us to understand some of this data, we don't want you to have to translate every little data piece in your codes into something that we understand. So, but we do, this list of slides is going to have some areas where you're going to sort of provide definitions for us to hopefully help us understand the data we receive from you. So one of the most important is, you know, over 9.5 years, we need to know the academic years and the codes that represent those terms. And one of the other pieces is you're going to share with us, what do you call those terms at your institution? So different people call terms different things. Sometimes it's fall spring, but they're not always. And we don't want to assume and give it our nomenclature. We want you to use yours, so it's easy with the task force to understand what they're looking at. Grade equivalencies, we have a simple table, A, B, C, D, F, P, I. A lot of people use those, but people also don't use those. And they use different things, and different things can mean the same thing. So in order to translate the results of a student taking a course and whether they succeeded or not, or how well they succeeded, you're just going to share with us how those grades translate into A's, B's, C's, D's, F's, I's, T's. And that's what that does. Instructor designations, we're not looking for whether it's Susan Campbell teaching the course. It's more of what's her rank or her classification? Is she full-time tenured faculty? Is she an adjunct? Is she a visiting instructor? Or whatever makes sense at your institution. I mean, sometimes it's as simple as full-time or part-time. A lot of times at community colleges and then research institutions have a much different structure for their instructors. But by using this instructor designation table, you'll be able to share the codes that match up to what your task force is going to understand when they're looking at this. And then we'll also ask for information about advising structures, advising type, and you'll be able to map whatever you call your advising structure and advisors, the types of advisors, to sort of predefined things that NACADA we have in the platform for that. But this way, if they happen to be Trojan advisors or whatever, that's one thing, and you call the other ones Spartan advisors. We don't know what those are here at the Gardner Institute or NACADA, but that one might be the type of advisors who have one-on-one in their faculty types, and the others are, professional advisors. And you'll map those to whatever makes sense. But when your task force looks at the data, the tables will show them what they understand. That way we can look at the data on the backside, and your fellow who is helping guide you can also understand better what they're looking at when they look at what makes sense to your task force. Any input from anybody else? Any questions on this slide?
Sure. Are you going to provide the sort of a data dictionary with all
We will have one a little bit later. We're just doing some cleanup this week, and we'll make sure it's out to everyone by the 1st of August.
Okay. And what's the timeline on this?
So this is one of those things that should be done. The upload should be done before everybody really digs into the data and starts the process. It's not going to be done before the virtual launch. I don't think that's possible. But you'll want to sort of, after the next set of webinars where we share, this is how you should set up your committees, people who should be involved. You'll have an idea of how that needs to get started. And at the same time, your IR folks are going to have to look at the data elements that are being requested and look at their calendar and go, okay, I have time in late September, late October to do this, or whatever makes sense for them. So I can get it to you by this date. A lot of times you sort of work both by looking at where they can fit into the calendar, but also working backwards from when you want to start. But one of the most important things, and thank you for bringing that question up now, is the IR folks, the folks with the data need to be brought into the conversation now so they know what's going to happen. You don't want to surprise them on September 15th saying, hey, by the way, we need this data by the end of the month so we can start a project. It usually takes 6 to 8 weeks maybe to pull the data. It's not working every day on it. It's just, in my experience, I've seen people get this done in 2 weeks once they sort of say, okay, we're starting, and then they start uploads in a week or two, and then there's a time to sort of, but the institution takes a look at the data and goes, that makes sense, except for this data element. What happened here? Why is this 100 students higher in this cohort than everything else, where everything else looks fine? And we answer that question, and we figure it out, and then either a new upload has to happen or we do some troubleshooting on our end. Part of this is you folks are a pilot cohort. We have used this platform and this process since 2012. APUS was whether you know it or not, an earlier version, helped us with this platform and some data verification process back in 2013.
So Rob, was that the G2C project or the FOE project that we provided?
The G2, the Gateways to Completion,
Okay.
use this same data set of elements. We've added more because this one takes into account advising.
Okay. So unfortunately, the person who worked on that doesn't work here anymore. Of course he doesn't. So I may just need to touch base with you and see what he gave you and what I can dig up here in terms of the terms and how we approached it, because we have monthly starts, so we're a little different. So I would probably try to be consistent with how he did it when we did G2C. But then also I had a question about you said something about 9.5 years of data. Are we going back 9.5 years, or are we going to start, with some smaller amount and then look at it going forward as we make improvements? I mean, I guess what is the cutoff? How far back do we go?
So the idea is to request 9.5 years of prior data so we can look at what's gone on.
Gotcha.
There are institutions who do not have 9 years of data they can trust. So at that point, you're just wherever they start to trust their data.
Well, we have it. It's just we've had a lot of changes over the years, so maybe Carolyn and I can talk about what date range makes sense for us. Where you get data that's still really appropriate for our institution. Right. It might be hard to get the advisor data in the format all the way back. I don't know about that.
Right, and I'd say even if you can't get advisor data, the rest of the data can still be helpful. And then when the advisor data sort of starts kicking in and you can match that up, then start including that. Because there are other data elements that may drop in and out. For you, it doesn't matter as much, but one of the data elements is a residence hall. And those come online and offline over 9.5 years at different institutions where they have more of a model where people stay on campus. Same thing for advisor programs and retention programs. Those come and go also over 9 years.
Yeah, I was going to jump in. It's because it's a question we've talked about a lot, because a lot happens over 9 years at an institution in a lot of different ways, so as much as possible, being able to kind of do the historical progression of, and when we say advising structures and advisor types, so advisor types is we have faculty advisors, we have primary role advisors, we have peer advisors, we have graduate student advisors. So those are advisor types kind of thing. Advisor structures would be, so think about it connected to the academic major. For biology majors, all of the advising is done by faculty. For the English department, the advising is done by faculty, and also we have a couple of primary role advisors. For undeclared students, they're assigned to a team, and A through L goes to these three, and so it's kind of all over boards, but the board, of course, but it would be interesting to be able to capture, and we're trying to allow for this in the platform, if it's once it's connected to the academic program, a place for you to say, we actually have just moved, in 2013, moved from a faculty-only model to a shared model with faculty advisors and primary role advisors. And so to be able to kind of see we'll be able to not only see the progression of advising structures across the academic programs and others, but also then connect the students by their academic program to the advising structure and advisor types, even if they've changed majors over the years. We think this is the only platform project process that will systematically, if we're going to say advising is teaching, and that advising contributes to student success, that this will be really the only way. I'm just going to say that boldly. If we're going to connect advising to student learning, that we need to connect advisors to students and how they move through that process. And by advisors, I don't mean the name, but the types who are assigned, and are they required, and are they optional, and how often are they accessed? And because we take a lot of credit and therefore a lot of blame for contributions to persistence and retention and graduation. So this is a way for you to really illuminate on your campus how that shifts through the years. So it'll be fun to see. Small F.
Wendy,
Yep.
I think it's, and Rob, one of the conversations that we've also had is that, and Rob mentioned it, that not all institutions will have all of these elements. And that's important to know and work on during the course of this project. So we don't want people to have panic attacks because they're missing an element.
Mm-hmm.
No.
Yeah, and we're with you every step, for sure.
Yeah, we're there to answer questions, and some of these may even bring up discussions that you may have been having internally, and you're like, okay, you're requesting this. I've been asking for it, and now here's another entity going, yes, this is important for this. If you're going to really look at this topic, you need to look at how you capture this data, if you capture it at all, or whatnot. All right. So the next one, let's student classifications. By default, the system is going to have the classification set at 30, 60, and 90 credit hours earned. If that changes, or if that is not the same at your institution, just change those. And that way we'll process the data and sort the students accordingly. Aid programs, this is a way for you to share the type of aid programs that you have at your institutions and associated with students per term on a per term basis. This is not necessarily the best way probably to capture every little aid program you have. We've had some institutions load 800 aid programs over 9 years, which leads to a very unwieldy table. So sometimes it's better to figure out a way to group those to make sense. But again, that can be a conversation when you start to look at that. Residence locations, we ask whether or not they are located on campus, and that's a simple yes or no, and then if they are, where? And that's just something you sort of tell us. And then there's success and persistence programs that you put in there. And these will also have whether or not advisors or advisor types are associated with some of these programs, and they don't have to be, but it's part of the definition whether or not they are associated. And then athletic teams are going to be listed.
So think of the success persistence programs as initiatives you offer to students to help them succeed. And there was a comment yesterday about, wow, well, I know so-and-so is doing this over here and so-and-so is doing it there. We've got them all over the campus. Exactly. This is a place to actually pull all of that as much as you can together in one platform, in one folder, if you will, and start to see where there is legitimate duplication across a large, complex campus, where there might be redundancy, and even more importantly, where there may be gaps in all of that. And so all of this comes down to, are we okay with that? Or we really need to pull this together in a little bit more systematic oversight way. Not talking about full centralization, but at least having a handle on where it's happening across campus. Fascinating part of this. And then where, as Rob said, are advisors involved in those programs? If not, why not? Could they be? Should they be? And where they are, how are they involved, and what does that bring to the table in terms of chances for success for students?
Okay, there is another section that you'll see when you get on the platform. And in this institutional definitions area, there's something called comparative course information. That is not for your IR folks. This is not for the data load. This is for afterwards. The project leader or somebody else who's designated as such just goes in here and maps college, college algebra or Calc 1 to whatever that means at your institution. So that way we'll know when we're showing some information and when we're looking at it later that MAT 1201 is really Calc 1 at your institution. And when we go to another institution, the advisor can kind of get an idea that, Math 101 is really Calc 1. It just helps us keep that information straight. So but that is not IR. That is not something that is loaded at the time of these data files that we're talking about right now. And I just want to put that out there up front before the person starts looking at it and goes, I don't know how to map this and load this. It doesn't fit into the data files you gave me. So I just want that out there now. It can save a conversation or two in a phone call.
And just another reiteration that when you see your platform, it'll use your language for what you use on your campus, which is a really amazing and wonderful thing that Rob and his team have done.
Okay, and these are just some examples of what those definition areas look like. This is what it looks like when you start to tell us about your academic years and the terms that are associated with those years. This is the 13-14 academic year, and for this institution, they have 3 terms. The academic year starts in summer, and it goes through fall and spring. The flags just tell us that there's more information to be loaded before the system can actually use this. The first, and I also know by looking at this that in the tables, when it's going to show some results by term, it's going to show me summer, fall, and spring. That's how it's going to list the name of the terms: summer 2013, fall 2013, spring 14. For the data files, I expect if you have a banner system, you'll give me some 6-character code in there. And then the system goes in and looks at the code and knows how to name the files or the column headers, and then a start and end date. Another piece that we don't see here is whether or not that term is sort of a standard length term where 12 or more hours is a full-time student. Okay. This next example is the grades. So these are the grades that we just ask you to help us understand when we're looking at your data files and the grades that students get. How does that map to here? And then there are 3 files, 3 file types. There's a student elements file, course elements, and financial aid. That's how we break things out. One of the main things that connects these, the fields that sort of connect this data are the academic year, the term codes, and then each student is identified by a unique project ID that you on your campus generate to represent that student, and you don't share with us how you get that unique ID. We ask that it be 10 characters. Whatever works for you works for us. The system will just, in that way, we can use that same GSID to track that student across those files and across those terms and academic years. Okay. I'm going to jump into the platform real quick, or what's there now, right after this slide here, or right now. All right. So this is what our sample college looks like right now. They haven't uploaded any, I guess we do have 1 year of data in here. and it will log you out quickly if you haven't used it in a while. So here we go. I hope you can read this. I've uploaded data, and I've made some definitions. So this top section sort of helps lead me in the beginning into setting up some of the pieces. The A table, some general information can be completed by the project leader or somebody else on your steering committee at any time. It has some basic information about your institution. When we're looking for contact information, it's the IR folks and other people who are sort of in charge of completing this inventory in the beginning. We also ask for the type of information systems that you're using. Sometimes it can be handy if we know somebody's using Banner, this version versus that version, and there are two people in a cohort who are trying to figure something out. If we can at least connect them, I usually reach out and I'll say, do you mind having a conversation with such and such? I don't just tell everybody what's going on. I reach out to you first and I say, somebody's having an issue. Would you mind sharing what you did with them? And depending on the answer, either there's a connection made or there isn't. So that's sort of the first table that can be filled out. Now, I'm going to back up, but A2 through G are all populated by the system by processing the data that's provided by your institution. So we're looking at retention and graduation step tables. You don't have to make those up and then give them to me. They're just generated from the data that's provided. But that's probably one of the first tables that we'll look at to make sure that the data is being reported as you expect it to be. If it doesn't show up here as you expect it to be, that same information is throughout the rest of the table. So we'll want to make sure this table looks good. If it doesn't, then we sit down and we start trying to figure out what doesn't look right and why. But this is all done by the data provided by the IR and the data staff. While you folks in the data end are working on those, there's plenty to do by the rest of the steering committee that's getting this process rolling. H, I, J, K, L, and M are all tables that can be started, completed during this process period. In a way, this is kind of like a wiki. It may never be complete, but it can get to a point where you're like, okay, we're ready. This inventory is at a point where it's ready to be used by the conditions committees as they start to have their conversations. These tables will be linked to appropriate areas to help inform conversations later on. And then if they want to add to any of these H through M tables, they can do that. If there's something that's missed or something that's added later on, they can always go back and add things to that. And that's also, at some point, you'll click request feedback, and an email will go to your fellow, your EAA fellow, and they'll review this information and provide some written feedback based on it. All right.
And there are other areas, as you'll see up there. There are documents that will. There's an evidence library that gets developed as you upload strategic planning documents and advising syllabi if you have them, for example. There will be 2 surveys, one that goes to faculty and staff and one that goes to students that are directly mapped to key performance indicators, key elements within the conditions. So when you're on kind of that platform for that condition committee, you have all the data from tables, the relevant evidence in your library, the relevant data from the feedback, from the surveys, and you have all that information available to you to go through the prompts that will lead you through the self-study process.
I have a question for y'all.
Sure.
At APUS, we have a large military population, but we also have civilian students. Is there a way in this data structure to indicate their military classification? For example, if they're active duty, veteran, military spouse, civilian, that sort of thing?
We do have some, I would have to look at that. We do ask for some of that information. I'm not sure, maybe we can have another conversation about how that's represented to see if that will show you things.
It might be
You're
just
asking.
another classification because, for example, like whether or not we don't have athletic teams because we're online. So we don't need that part, but there are other, other organizations we do have, but maybe if we can borrow from one of the other fields or something, we'll work that out with you.
Yeah. We don't muddy the water with fields, so we would have to, we'll look at something, but yeah, we wouldn't want to, we'll look at that.
Yeah, and I'll talk with Carolyn. Maybe there's something she does with advising that's different. So we can, maybe that will sort of take care of it anyway. So
Okay.
we'll talk too.
Okay. Sorry, I'm just taking a note. All right. Any other questions about the data population or what we've shown you so far? I expect more questions once you get the file next week, and even more questions once this actually makes it to your desk and you're like, okay, this project is going to be worked on. In the meantime, because this is a 30,000 foot overview, in the meantime, if you're trying to set this up and sort of manage it and put it into your project list, and you or the person you're going to designate as the person who's going to do this has any questions, feel free to let them call me or Wendy, email us, and we'll answer anything. We'll want to make sure that you get some users and roles set up. There's an institutional research role listed in here. So by default, whoever filled out the application is going to be the project leader. And then they're the only ones who can add new users. You can add more people to help you with that, of course, and you'll want to do that. And the role you'll want to make sure that the data person has is the institutional research role, institutional researcher / data analyst. And that will give them access to where they need to be. What's next, Wendy?
So that was that one.
Mm-hmm.
And then
I know this is the data webinar, but I like to remind folks that there's plenty for the rest of the team to do while the data is being worked on. This is that Section A table that can be worked on right away.
And we are preparing the guidebook as well. So this isn't a matter of attending this Zoom meeting and then you're off on your own. We are providing guidance for that, including setting up the user roles.
Right.
So just a reminder of kind of this big process. So really all of fall is about getting rolling and getting ready for this process. It's likely that different institutions will be on little different schedules depending on what your fall looks like. So that's part of the interesting thing about the process and fascinating is that we start to talk across the cohort. All right, that's what we have. So we've left good time, I hope, for your comments, questions. Sky's the limit. There was a question yesterday about IRB issues, human subjects research issues. That's really up to you at your institution. We'll not use your student data for research purposes without asking you first, and so that'll be down the line. Obviously, to have 12 institutions of different types going through a very similar process is just ripe for important inquiry across this. So we'll want to do that, but it certainly isn't the purpose of this project. And so whatever process you have on your campus for collecting these kind of data for this kind of purpose from your IRB folks, then go for it. And I believe that's addressed in the contracts, right, Susan and Jane? I think there is an element in there about about human subjects research. Sometimes some of you have kind of opt-in, opt-out things with your students, but it doesn't hurt to be conservative on that and bring your IRB folks in early. Other questions, comments? Nobody's gone screaming from the room yet, so that's good.
Not yet. I have a non-data related question. At the very beginning, you all mentioned that there were, I guess, meetings next week to talk about forming your team. I have not received anything for something like that, so I just wanted to make sure that I shouldn't have as of this point.
Well, Carolyn, that was, I will make sure that you get that invitation. We have 2 sessions, and my job is to send a reminder to everyone, so I'll make sure you're on that list. And one is on Tuesday, July 31st at, 3 p.m., Jane?
Eastern time.
Eastern time. Oh, yeah. Wendy gets me on that all the time.
They assume, Eastern time folks assume that's the only time zone that matters.
It is. But, and then on August 1st at 5 p.m. So we are trying to make sure that Eastern time.
Okay.
And we're doing that on behalf of the folks in Hawaii. So there. And it's really to talk through how to get up your conditions committees. We've had a couple of questions. Dante, yeah, you were involved in a conversation with Jane and me about that very thing. So if you can join any of those sessions, it'd be awesome. So folks can share a little bit about how they anticipate approaching that task, because there are myriad ways to do that.
Should it just be the project lead there? Should other people be there? What do you suggest?
Jane, I think you could invite as many people as
I'm going to say,
want,
yeah, I'm going to say the more the merrier. I'm going to jump in and say the more, more the merrier.
I was going to say, let's have a party. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I want to just note that, this is pilot kind of stuff, and so these were pretty. It wasn't like these have been scheduled for 2 months. This is kind of Jane and Susan saying, we're starting to get a lot of questions about forming the conditions team, so let's hold a couple of webinars to be recorded, and so they were pretty recently added to the schedule, right. I believe.
Yeah, and one of the key elements, Carolyn, is that we know that the human resource capacity of institutions is somewhat limited. We like to think that we're fully staffed, but we never are, because there's always more work to do. The key piece is to have the conditions addressed. It might be that one committee may address more than one. So you want to look at, and we'll talk about that on the webinar, and I really will send that to you. So that was probably my error.
No, that's fine. And then if I am actually out on vacation next week, but I will do my best to call in to one of them. So if you could send me both, that would be great. But if not, will you send out the recording afterwards?
Yes. Yes.
Thank you. Yes. I'm done.
You
don't be done.
Go on vacation. You can go on vacation.
And if I didn't say it earlier, you'll receive also this recording so that you can share it with others on your campus as well.
Are we also going to receive slides and all of that? Because some of the content you had in your presentation was really helpful. Maybe you said that and I missed it, but.
Well, we'll send the recording, which will have all the all the slides to it.
But
so
the data definitions, that's coming, right?
Those will, by August, by next week.
Okay.
It will be an Excel, and it could be an Excel spreadsheet. Rob, correct me if I'm wrong.
Okay, that sounds perfect. That's even better. Thank you.
when is the manual going to be prepared? Will that be coming next week too, that you talked about, a manual?
It won't be next week. Rob and the coders, the programmers are finalizing the platform, and so we're grabbing some screenshots from the platform that you just saw. So we're really using this next week or so to be sure that the platform is set up, the inventory structure is set up properly, so that we can grab screenshots and paths through things and that kind of thing. So probably what, Jane, in the next few weeks, right? We hope to get at least a good pass at a guidebook done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And as you mentioned, since this is a pilot, even the guidebook is going to be part of an iterative process. So as we work through it, we know that it's going to be dynamic and there will be changes. So just reminding people.
And we'll be looking to you for your help with that.
Right.
If you see
Absolutely.
something there that just is glaring, or that we've omitted, or that you feel is may not work for your institution, whatever it is, please let us know so that we can adjust accordingly.
Yeah. And one of the key dates then is the week of August 6th. The contracts will be sent to institutions. We want to have those returned as quickly as possible so that we can then release the names of all the participating institutions. And it is a pretty impressive list, as you can tell just from the folks who are participating today, and development and helping to develop some materials that we will use to promote, if you will, the project. But we also know that institutions are really interested in being able to let everyone on their campuses know about this project and the importance of it. Mm-hmm. So we're working as quickly as we can to get those contracts finalized and out, and then returned, and that'll start the process.
I think the proverbial floodgates will open. The balloons will appear on your in your plaza, on your campus, and the marching bands will show up, and the majorettes, and we'll have a big celebration. So it's important to, as soon as your institution can, to get those contracts back to us so that we can have that big splash party.
That's the EAA marching band, right?
It is the EAA marching band.
That's
yes.
Right. Dante's a member. Carolyn says secretly, privately on this that she would like to be a part of that too.
Can I ask a question about that? This is Vicki. I know that it was mentioned by Charlie Nutt that there was going to be something in relationship to a meeting with the NACADA conference that's coming up this fall as part of this cohort. Are y'all going to give us any information about that, or is that just still under development? I don't know that was anything to do with a kickoff, but it was mentioned in that first meeting the last meeting that we had on June 5th.
We do have a date, so I believe you can mark this in stone on your calendars. We will be meeting on October 1st from 3:30 to 5. We even have a room number. We just got that today. We will certainly be sending out more information to you, but if you could at least mark your calendars for August 1st and block off that 3:30 to 5 time.
October 1st.
October 1st, thank you.
1st, yes. And while we encourage the liaisons, while it's not a mandatory session, we really strongly encourage people to attend the conference if they can, so they can participate in that meeting. We don't think it should be limited to the liaisons. So anybody who would like to attend would be more than welcome. Our limit is 60 in the room. Just want to let you know. So we're planning for that.
Did you have a follow-up? Did I hear you have a follow-up?
Yes. Question? I have a follow-up question. Yes. Would you send us some information about that when you can? And do you have to be registered for the full conference if people wanted to come in for this meeting, particularly if they were not necessarily interested in going to the full conference? Because that might impact who we would invite. I know I'm going, and I've got some other advisors and things that are going to be going, but there could be some of our other members of our steering committee that might not want to go to the full conference. So just wonder, because it's pretty expensive, and we're going to have to fund that to get people there. So I'm just wondering.
I think they have one-day fees for conference attendance. Am I right on thinking that? I know the veterans, Wendy and Susan.
Let me double check that. It probably that's a good question, but let me double check with that. There are great sessions they could go to. But.
Well, I know, but some of us will be, of course.
Sure,
yes.
sure.
But if we want to bring like an IR person that might not want to stay for the conference, that kind of
Yeah.
So that's what I'm trying to get at.
I was going to pipe in and say it would be a good time to, bring the IR folks together. They can start to talk about what they're doing.
Of course, it's only an hour.
It's
only an hour and a half, right? It's only an hour and a half meeting, so it's not going to be too deep a dive, but it'll.
Well, what we can certainly do is have Rob rodeo lasso everybody, and so get together afterwards.
That would be great.
Yeah.
Why don't we also take that?
Drinks
Vicki,
on him.
Yeah, take that up with Charlie and the conference committee, and we'll make sure that we have some clarification in the invitation about that very question.
That's a great question.
It's a great question, and we want to be as inclusive as we can. So,
and in that timing for the work that we're talking about today, it's good timing, I think, for what's going to be done.
I wonder if we'll kind of Zoom it too for those who might want to join virtually.
That's what I was thinking. That might be a better way to do it.
That might be a compromise. Yeah.
That could be a really good way to expand the group.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That really might be. I like that idea because we can kind of work it into the structure that maybe we do some preliminary stuff, and then the fellows, we're inviting the fellows to those sessions as well, and you will receive those assignments again once the contract is returned. But maybe we designate a portion of that session so that we can all do individual Zooms with other people on our campus. I would like that.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm saying actually have that session Zoomed.
We could do that as well.
Yeah, because if you think about it, if the room is limited to 60, and you've got 1 times 12 liaisons, 2 times 12 representatives, that's already almost 40 people.
Right.
Plus other troublemakers. So that might be a good way to bring others on campus in on it and not feel
I like
they've missed anything.
Wonderful idea.
Thank you.
We'll check on both though. We'll check on both questions. Yeah.
Well, we have to go because we're getting pushed out of our room.
Pushed out of your Supreme Court room there.
Welcome to our world.
Love it. Love it.
Thank you.
You bet. Any other questions from anybody? Yeah, we're right at the top of the hour here.
Thank you.
Yep. Thank you so much.
You.
We'll send you the link for this so you can share it with others, and certainly shoot us a note or give us a call on any other questions you might have.
Sounds good. Bye, guys.